Humans are creatures of routine. They rise with alarms, fill cups with coffee, and believe that the repetition of ordinary days is strong enough to hold back the chaos of the world. In that rhythm, they build safety. In that rhythm, they build love. Theirs was no different. Morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen table where two mugs always stood, one dark with bitter coffee, the other pale with cream and sugar. Small things defined them more than declarations ever could. A kiss before leaving for work, a text in the afternoon asking about dinner, laughter tucked into evenings that stretched comfortably between four walls. To anyone watching, they were whole. They were enviable. The protagonist believed in this wholeness. Belief was their cornerstone. They trusted that each late night at the office was necessary, that each unanswered call had a reason, that devotion could be measured by years rather than questioned by moments. They did not know it yet, but this trust was not a weakness. It was the purest expression of humanity itself. Animals guard territory. Machines perform functions. But humans survive because they choose to believe in one another. And yet, even the strongest walls carry hairline fractures. They appear unnoticed, a laugh too long over a message, a perfume lingering in the car that didn't match the scent they knew, the way their partner's phone tilted away during conversations. Nothing certain, nothing incriminating, just fragments, scattered like pebbles along a trail they refuse to follow. Still, silence carries its own weight. When two people share a life, absences speak louder than words. The protagonist felt the weight in the pauses, in the way dinners grew quieter, in how the other side of the bed seemed both occupied and distant at once. To confront such things is human. To deny them is human, too. So they told themselves stories, that the missed call was just bad timing, that the secrecy was nothing more than stress, that love, long proven and worn like a second skin, was unshakable. Whatever it was didn't matter. That became the refrain, whispered to themselves whenever doubt stirred in the quiet hours. But the human heart notices more than the mind admits. Each unanswered question stacked upon the last, until they formed a shadow too large to ignore. The protagonist did not yet seek the truth. They were not ready to tear apart the life they had built, not ready to face what suspicion would confirm. But the air had shifted. They felt it every time they reached for a hand that lingered a second too long before returning the grasp. The story of their life was changing, and they sensed it without fully knowing. Humans possess an instinct for storms long before the first thunder cracks. And somewhere, deep inside, they understood. The peace of repetition was already broken. Still, they clung to the phrase that comforted and deceived in equal measure. Whatever it was didn't matter. At least, not yet. Suspicion begins quietly. It does not announce itself with certainty. Instead, it drips one moment at a time into the spaces where trust once lived. At first, the protagonist ignored the signs. They told themselves that long hours at work were noble, that unexplained smiles over text messages were harmless, that new fragrances clinging faintly to clothing meant nothing. Humans are experts at storytelling, and no one tells themselves better stories than those who are desperate to keep believing. But stories unravel. A receipt folded deep in a jacket pocket spoke of a dinner that was never mentioned. A late-night call answered in another room stretched longer than any business matter should. Even laughter, so familiar once, sounded different when shared with someone unseen. It was not evidence, not yet. It was only fragments, but fragments have weight. Together, they began to crush the silence. One evening, the quiet broke. A phone, left carelessly on the counter, buzzed again and again until curiosity overcame restraint. Curiosity, so human, so dangerous. The protagonist's hand trembled as they lifted the device, telling themselves they were not looking for anything, that they only wanted the noise to stop. But eyes betray what hearts already fear. The screen glowed with words that pierced deeper than any blade. Endearments written for another. Plans whispered into texts that carried more intimacy than any marriage vow. It was not a mistake. It was not misread. It was undeniable. In that instant, time fractured. The world narrowed to the glow of the phone. the pounding of blood in their ears, the echo of their own breath. Betrayal has a way of reshaping the body. It stiffens the spine, hollows the chest, makes hands clench as though gripping something solid when everything has already fallen apart. Humans alone suffer in this way. A machine malfunctions and is repaired. An animal loses its mate and simply moves on. But people tear themselves open with questions. Why?
How long?
Was I not enough? They replay moments, searching for signs missed, for lines spoken that now ring false. They torture themselves with answers they may never receive. The protagonist stood frozen, holding a truth they never asked for but could no longer deny. The home around them seemed unfamiliar, as though every wall had overheard secrets and conspired to keep them hidden. Every object, the mugs on the table, the jacket on the chair, the framed photos smiling down, suddenly mocked them with the weight of what they thought they knew. Silence pressed in, heavier than words could bear. And in that silence, the phrase returned, sharper now, almost cruel. Whatever it was didn't matter. But the truth was different this time. Because now it mattered more than anything. The truth does not stay hidden once it is seen. It lingers, demanding to be spoken, poisoning every silence until the air itself becomes unbearable. For days, the protagonist carried the weight in their chest, rehearsing words in empty rooms, imagining outcomes that always ended with the same conclusion. Something precious had already been broken. The confrontation came not with shouting, but with quiet resolve. A table, 2 chairs. A room that had once been filled with laughter, now heavy with dread. The protagonist's voice was steady, though their hands trembled against the wood. One question, simple, impossible to escape. Why? The partner looked away first. That was the beginning. Explanations followed, loneliness, temptation, late nights that blurred into choices they claimed not to understand. They spoke of emptiness, of needing something more, of mistakes that didn't mean anything. But betrayal has no gentle translation. Words cannot soften the truth when trust has already been shattered. The protagonist listened, each sentence carving deeper wounds. Not because of the details, but because of the indifference beneath them. To love someone is to give them a map to your heart. To betray them is to burn it while pretending it was never important. Humans are strange in this way. They demand reasons even when none exist. They search for meaning in chaos, for patterns in pain. A machine would record the failure and move on. An animal would leave or fight. But humans ache to understand. And in that search for understanding, they often discover only more hurt. The conversation spiraled. Accusations met denials. Denials met evidence. Evidence crumbled into silence. The partners shifted from excuses to apologies. Words poured out in floods, as though language itself could mend what actions had destroyed. But apologies are powerless when trust has already drowned. The protagonist felt anger, yes, but beneath it, something heavier, grief. Anger burns hot and quick, but grief settles into the bones. They mourned not only the love betrayed, but also the person they thought they knew, the life they believed they had built, the future that now dissolved like smoke. Their voice finally broke through the storm. Not loud, not sharp, just final. Whatever it was didn't matter. The words landed with a weight neither could deny. Because in the end, the betrayal was not about the act itself. It was about the fracture of something far greater, the belief that they were safe within another's promise. And once that belief was gone, no explanation could restore it. The room fell silent. 2 people, one truth between them, and a chasm that could never again be crossed. Humans endure wars, losses, disasters, yet nothing feels as unbearable as the betrayal of one heart by another. And still they survive it. That is their tragedy and their triumph. After the storm of words, there was only quiet. The kind of quiet that fills a home stripped of warmth, where even the ticking of a clock feels intrusive. The partners slept in another room that night, or perhaps did not sleep at all. It did not matter. What mattered was the space between them, a space wider than oceans, impossible to cross. Morning came with sunlight that did not care. Curtains glowed the same way they always had. The world outside carried on with ordinary noises. Cars passing, children laughing, neighbors walking dogs. Grief is cruel in that way. It does not stop the world. It only stops you. The protagonist moved through the house, as though it belonged to someone else. Every object seemed to carry two lives now, the one they believed they had, and the one they actually did. A photograph on the wall, once proof of love, now stood as evidence of how easily smiles can lie. The bed, too large and cold, reminded them of promises that no longer meant anything. Even the mugs on the table seemed hollow, stripped of ritual. Yet within the emptiness, something unexpected stirred. Pain is proof of love's depth, but it is also proof of humanity's resilience. Machines break and are discarded. Animals adapt without reflection. But humans endure because they create meaning out of suffering. They write songs about heartbreak, paint portraits of loss, whisper stories of betrayal into the dark, and in doing so, transform pain into survival. The protagonist felt this truth slowly, as though it were a seed cracking open inside them. Yes, trust had been broken. Yes, love had been betrayed. But the ability to feel so deeply was not weakness, it was strength. To love at all is to risk destruction, and yet people continue. That is humanity's greatest defiance. Days bled into weeks. The partner's apologies, once constant, faded into silence. A suitcase left the house one afternoon and did not return. The protagonist stood at the window, watching taillights disappear, and felt something strange, not just sorrow, but release. Whatever had been shared was gone, but they remained. Whole, scarred, human. Walking outside, they found the sky unchanged. Strangers still laughed on sidewalks. The world did not notice their loss, and perhaps that was its mercy. Because life's persistence offered a lesson, betrayal does not end the human story. It becomes part of it. They whispered to themselves one last time, steady now, almost certain. Whatever it was didn't matter. Not because it had no impact, but because it could not erase who they were. What mattered was the endurance to rise again, the courage to risk believing once more. Humans stumble, humans break, humans betray. Yet humans also rebuild. And in that cycle of ruin and renewal lies their unmatched strength. The story was not over. It never is.